Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Bird Photography Fundamentals with Glenn Bartley
Hello.
and me, Jan Wegener.
What exactly are we talking about here with back button focus, Jan? What is back button focus?
Well, basically with back button autofocusing, the idea is that traditionally cameras focus and take the pictures on the shutter button, whereas with back button autofocusing, we're decoupling the focusing and the picture taking basically. And so the shutter button is only there for the picture taking, and then we actually assign the focusing to one or two or more of the buttons on the back of the camera.
Now, for many of you, you've been doing this for years. This is going to sound super obvious, and you already maybe know about the benefits. But for some of you, you might not have heard about back button focus, and this might sound kind of like a strange thing. You're so familiar, you're so used to pressing that shutter button to autofocus and take pictures that this might sound like something kind of strange.
That's definitely true. And when you start out, like I think it was strange for me, it's probably strange for you. The first time you actually change it, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? This feels so bad. But then I think once you look at all the benefits that we're going to explain to you, it almost feels more natural or better to me over time. But the only recommendation I would give is it will start to feel strange for a while. So don't get discouraged right away. Give it a fair go, and I think you will love it over time for sure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. If you're switching over from front button shutter focusing to back button, you have to give it at least 2 or 3 shoots out in the field to give yourself time to get used to it before you decide right away, like, I don't like this. Here's the reality. If you're switching, you probably will miss shots the first time out of the gate. But as we're going to explain, there's some serious benefits. In the DSLR days, it was kind of a choice, like do you do front button or back button? Some people just more familiar with one or the other. But nowadays with mirrorless, and especially with the advent of the eye detect autofocus, there is even more reason to have 2 buttons assigned to autofocus for you rather than just the shutter button.
In the DSLR days, we often used the back button autofocusing for a few reasons, but the main reason was basically that all the autofocus fields on a DSLR camera were basically just in the center of the frame. So if we had a bird that we wanted to compose in the upper corner of the image, we actually had to somehow get the autofocus field there, then recompose the image, and then take the photo. So you might say, but I can still focus and recompose by using the front shutter button, but I think it's actually difficult because let's imagine the bird's in the upper corner, you want to focus on it. So you move your autofocus fields over, focus on the bird, half press to focus, then you let go, recompose your image. And if you want to actually take the photo now, you have to half press the shutter button, and by half pressing the shutter button, the camera will now focus again. And if you're not on your subject, the camera will actually lose the focus to the background or to the perch or something else, and you're losing that nice scene and composition.
I have to be honest, I was kind of a late adopter to the back button focus world, and I lost so many shots to things like that where you're all ready, the bird, maybe you're waiting for him to take off or something like that, and then you kind of get tired of waiting, so you take your hand away, and then, oh, he's about to go, and you go to press the button, and the camera goes right to the background, and you miss the shot. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. It was once the cameras allowed me to assign 2 different buttons, for me it was a no-brainer. I had to switch over, because now I could have servo focusing on one of my buttons with a small little array of focus points. So that was great for if the bird was moving around or for flight shots. And I could have the other one be this very, very accurate single point focusing mode with the one shot. So now if I have a stationary bird, put that focus, that small little focus point right on his eye, get that, and all of a sudden, oh, I think he's gonna get ready to fly. I can just move my thumb, boop, over 1 centimeter, and all of a sudden I'm ready for action and flight shooting. And that was like, all of a sudden it made sense to me.
And I usually had the back button autofocusing assigned to the star button. So if I press down the button and hold it down, it would continuously focus if I want to do some action or if the bird's moving. And the moment I let the button go, the camera will stop focusing and it will stay on the last point that I focused on. So kind of like a one shot as well. So I basically had to one shot enter AI servo on the one button. If I press it, it will track, and if I let it go, it will stay on the last point that I focused on. So that just gave us both real flexibility in the field to use this different autofocusing modes without actually having to go into the camera menu or pressing any other button. So it's super fast.
Absolutely, yeah. The last thing you want to have to do is go, oh, well, now I want to do flight shooting. I'll get into the menu and change some settings. I mean, the bird's gone. The bird is long gone by the time you do that. So you don't want to be doing that. But basically what it all boils down to is, generally speaking, it's easier to miss focus if you have to use that shutter button to do both the focusing and the taking of the picture, because there's more chance that you're going to, hit that button and the camera is just getting that input from you. Oh, do you want me to start autofocusing or do you want me to take the picture? And many times it's going to bump focus off of what you're actually trying to take the picture of.
And if you're a bird photographer and want to learn all about image editing, we would highly recommend that you check out our PROSETS, ebooks, and masterclasses down there in the description.
In these invaluable resources, we show you guys step by step exactly how we edit our images, and it will help you to get better results, save time, and learn a lot along the way.
And with our PROSETS, we enable you with just one click to transform your RAW files.
So if you want to get the absolute most out of your images, be sure to check out those resources down in the description.
And you were saying something before as well, that with the mirrorless cameras, it's even more important now. And I would totally agree, because of the characteristics of the mirrorless autofocusing systems, because they are more prone, or they have more difficulty focusing at like different distance, for instances, or they have a little bit more trouble sometimes finding the subject. So in these cases, it can really help if you have one button assigned to the eye tracking, for instance, the star button. So whenever you press the star button, it will instantly activate the eye tracking, track the bird all over your viewfinder. And if it misses focus, it can be very difficult with the eye tracking to actually get it to focus on a specific point again. So in this case, it's really good to have the other button, in my case, the AF on button, assigned to the normal spot autofocusing. And then I can pretty easily just press the other button and point the camera at a certain point, maybe like a tree trunk really nearby the bird, and it will instantly then focus on that point. And so having the ability to use the eye tracking at all times, but also kind of directing the autofocus with the spot autofocus is very beneficial and almost crucial, I'd say.
I totally agree. I mean, these days, I think that's exactly right. Some birds, the algorithm just doesn't recognize the face or the eye. And like I mentioned, I think before on the show, I was photographing some pileated woodpeckers, and it just doesn't know that it's a bird. I don't know what it is about the black and white and the stripe. And if all you have available to you on the front button, or if you only have one back button, is the animal eye detect, you're out of luck. It's not going to grab it. So all I have to do, oh, it's not working, just boop, move it over, and I'm back in business. I'm going to give you guys one more example, if we haven't already convinced you enough about back button focus. Imagine you're set up and you think this bird is, for example, going to come back and land on a particular perch. You pre-focus, of course, on the perch, and you're ready to go. And if you're with the front button, you're just waiting. What if you wanted to use a cable release? To just be waiting, and that way you can watch the whole field of view rather than look through your viewfinder, and then just push that cable release and spray away at 20 or 30 frames a second to capture that action. Well, if you have the camera on front button focus, as soon as you push that cable release, it's going to try to autofocus. It's going to move you off of the plane of focus that you wanted, and you're going to miss the shot. If you're on back button, there you go. You just nailed it.
And the same's actually true just if you use your finger, because it's the same concept really. If you pre-focus on a perch and then the bird comes, you press the button, you might just miss the bird and it will focus on the background, or actually miss the bird. So in these cases, if you want to pre-focus on anything, it's really crucial not have the focusing assigned to the shutter button. Personally, I also find back button autofocusing much better for flight shots, because I feel like I can be more ready, or not even for flight shots, but even when there's a lot of action happening, because I can half press the shutter button and be ready at all times to fire away without my camera focusing on all these areas that I don't want to focus. So I control the focusing and whatever I want to focus on with the rear buttons, and I move the autofocus points around with the joystick or use the eye tracking, and have the front button half pressed. So whenever I want to take a photo, I can fire right away. And especially for fast action, I feel like I'm more in control, because I don't have to kind of have my finger off and then fire. I have my finger half pressed and can fire at all times. So personally, I find that I get images just that quarter of a second faster, which can be a big advantage sometimes. And the other reason why I think it's very important as well, especially with the mirrorless cameras as well, sometimes we kind of need to make a manual focusing adjustment because the camera wants to actually focus on something else. Let's say the background is a bit brighter than my perch, and then it's always kind of drawn to the background. So I can make a manual focusing adjustment or pre-focus, and then if I press the front shutter button, it will refocus and I will likely lose my focusing plane back onto the background. Whereas with the rear button, I can actually half press the shutter button, wait until the bird comes. Once it's in the viewfinder, I can press the rear button and then it will likely stay on that point.
So I think we've given you guys lots of compelling reasons to switch to back button autofocus if you're not already using it. But let's talk a little bit about how you might set it up actually on your camera. Now, of course, every camera is different manufacturers' menus. We can't go through every single camera out there. But essentially what you want to do, the first step is to disable autofocusing from the actual shutter button so that the shutter button is only releasing to take the pictures. And then you're going to look at your camera and think about what makes sense to you and how you use it. On the Canon system, I use the AF on and the star buttons. But there are other options, and it does depend on what camera. I've heard of some people using one of the buttons on the front of the camera or something else. To me, that's getting to be too many things. Like I've got one here, and then the shutter. That doesn't click with my brain. But if it works for you, go for it. The key is to find 2 different buttons to assign autofocus parameters to.
That was actually one of the difficulties I had when I was using the Nikon Z9 because it has only one button in the rear. And it has 3 buttons on the front of the camera here. And I was actually forced to use one of these buttons, or they have some buttons on the lens as well you can assign autofocusing to. And my brain is so used to having 2 back buttons where my thumb just have to switch. So getting used to having one button that I have to use with my middle finger basically and one with my thumb was actually kind of difficult. But that's where it just comes down to how's your camera set up, and there's not one right way. I think throughout this video you've already seen that Glenn and I've set it up slightly different. So the key is to just find a way for you to assign 2 different autofocusing modes to 2 different buttons on your camera. And just as Glenn said, disable the focusing on the front button and then find 1 or 2 buttons either in the rear, if there's not enough buttons, maybe in the front, that work for you for focusing and having those different focusing modes assigned.
So one final question here for you, Jan, is do you use back button autofocus 100% of the time?
I do, because I definitely like to have my cameras set up a certain way. Like I have 2 or 5 cameras and I've set them up exactly the same way. So it's very easy for me to just grab it and use it. And I feel like if I make too many changes, I start to miss shots because your muscle memory kind of forgets, oh, I've made a change. If you haven't tried back button autofocusing yet, we would recommend that you at least try it out because there's a lot of benefits and it will help you actually a lot of times in the field to decouple the focusing from the front shutter button because it just gives you more control and more options over the camera.
We believe that it will help you to get more keepers and take more great bird photos, which ultimately is what it's all about.
So that wraps up this episode of the Bird Photography Fundamentals. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you try out back button autofocusing and that it will give you a lot of great advantages in the field.
And as always, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, for liking this video, for subscribing to the channel, for asking us questions down in the comments field. We always like to hear from you guys. So thank you so much, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye, guys.